Before we start this video, don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoy the content at any point and if it resonates at any point. Also, subscribe to this channel to see your other placements when they come out. If you enjoy this video as well, consider booking a natal chart reading where I talk about your personality based on your placements and how it is that you come across towards others, as well as your talents, your financial astrology and career. And last but not least, I talk about your life path based on your North Node and what it is you're meant to materialize or accomplish. So let's get started. Saturn in Libra shows responsibility towards others, and Libra is the sign where Saturn is exalted. And that's because Saturn represents commitment, and Libra is about relationships and agreements. And it's also about consequences. That's why it rules law. Those with Saturn in Libra have strong self-accountability and make sure they are seen as trustworthy and reliable by others. And that's why Saturn does very well in Libra. And in situations where they aren't responsible, they manifest karma and collapses in their personal lives. Because Saturn in Libra manifests many obligations in one's life that they can't avoid. Libra is about commitments, and Saturn will create a responsibility towards such things. And Libra can also be about relationships. So those with Saturn in Libra can manifest a lot of demanding relationships or like duties from relationships. A lot of people may depend on them. The next thing is that Saturn shows fear, and Saturn in Libra shows someone who is very careful of their image and also fears letting other people down for fear of losing their trust or support. Also, they can fear others letting them down in relationships. So it can be vice versa depending on the person. But this fear can be debilitating in some cases or manifests as seriousness in the character or appeal towards rules, responsibilities, and consequences in their way of relating towards others. So it shows long-lasting relationships because in their relationships, those that have Saturn in Libra appeal towards responsibility and sense of duty rather than love or unreliable emotions. So in other words, the foundation of the relationships becomes very Saturnian or like very responsible or solid. So that's another reason why Saturn is exalted in Libra, because it shows the longest lasting relationship styles. But also, though it can show, difficulty with superficial relationships as well for that reason. So, unless a relationship is, built on solid foundation, Saturn in Libra will end a lot of relationships, if they're not serious or if they're like destructive towards one's success. But, the other thing that I wanted to bring up is that Saturn in Libra also has this ability to command a lot of fear or respect from others, because those that have this placement have an ability to appeal to the emotions of others, particularly with their authority. And Saturn is the planet of authority. So now let's talk about what Saturn in Libra means through each of the houses. If you have Saturn in Libra in your first house, which is the house of self, this shows that you are respected and you yourself will have a lot of standards, responsibilities, or sometimes even self-imposed, work on yourself. And this is the type of restrictions that Saturn manifests in your own life. And it could just be being very, very hard on yourself, or, having high standards for yourself in order to gain the respect or the support of other people. If Saturn in Libra is in the second house, which is about finances, this shows that you are somebody that financially restricts themselves or is quite frugal, calculated, or like responsible. And you have maybe a lot of obligations to respect when it comes to money. And generally speaking, the positive trait that this placement gives is that it shows that you may achieve a lot of financial success through being frugal, organized, and clear with your expenses, or with money in general, income and out expenses. So that is Libra Saturn in the second house. If you have Saturn in Libra in the third house, this shows that you're somebody that is careful and slow with your speech. You can be a man or woman of few words as well, because Saturn restricts things, and when it's in the third house, it restricts your speech. But this is in order to naturally maintain respect. And in general, your words naturally hold a lot of weight or authority when you have Saturn in the third house. And also, Saturn in Libra shows credibility and trust when it's in the third house. So you may be very careful and slow with your speech out of a fear of making verbal mistakes, making implications that are false, or being seen as credible. Like you have this desire to be seen as credible when it comes to your communication, and to command authority with your words. And just naturally, that's the effect that Saturn gives you, whether or not you're consciously trying to gain like people's respect. Like, people naturally respect what you say, and the things that you say can bring about a lot of responsibilities, so you're careful what you agree to or what you imply. If you have Saturn in Libra in the fourth house, which is about emotions, this is a place that Saturn does not necessarily like to be. So although your responsibilities can be built a lot on duty, trust, and solid commitments, there can be a lack of emotional appeal towards your relationships. And when Saturn is in your fourth house, this can be a restrictive kind of feeling, and Saturn can create a sense of emotional coldness or guardedness from the fear of being let down when it comes to relationships, because Saturn shows fears, and in Libra, this is about our way of relating towards others. So you may have this strict, cold, or authoritative way of relating towards others that revolves around responsibilities and duties, and that prevents you, or does not allow you to let your guard down, or it's like not focused around letting one's guard down. So anyways, that's Saturn kind of restricting the fourth house. Saturn puts rings around wherever it's at, and it's like about restrictions and limitations. And the fourth house is about vulnerability and emotions. So Saturn makes you more cold and serious and guarded, and like a man or woman of their word, but also you expect the same from others. Next, we have the fifth house. So if you have Saturn and Libra in the fifth house, which is about confidence, and it's also about ego, Saturn in the fifth house can show somebody that may struggle with confidence early on in life, and they have to gain this sense of confidence through their achievements or through the social support that they gain throughout their career and through their life, because Saturn in this case is in Libra, which is the sign of social support, and it's also about the perspectives of other people. So those that have Saturn in Libra in the fifth house can struggle with confidence because they put a lot of importance on other people's perspectives. So they will not let themselves get unrealistic views or expectations of themselves, unless other people will see things the same way, if that makes any sense. So they will not blow themselves out of proportion. They will not, gas themselves up just because they also put a lot of importance on what other people perceive things, and they care a lot about the opinions of others. And sometimes this can be a debilitating aspect of Saturn, because Saturn rules the 10th house, which is about public opinion, and this is about our reputation. So sometimes the fear of other people's perceptions or reputations not aligning with how you perceive yourself can make you feel more humble than feels good. And like, you can also have struggles with confidence, because you feel like you need to prove yourself, or you feel like others' perceptions may not align. So that means that you are not as important as you are portraying, or something like that. So anyways, Saturn can show self-doubts when it's in the 5th house. And generally speaking, it can show a fear of standing out or something because of what people might think or how people might see things. Because Libra is about other people's perceptions, and Saturn is about the opinions of others, or like, our reputation and stuff like that. And Saturn has a debilitating effect in the chart. So again, this causes humility or groundedness of your ego when it's in the 5th house. Next, we have the 6th house. So if you have Saturn and Libra in the 6th house, this shows quite a disciplined worker and somebody that has a strong appeal towards standards or quality. They can be hard workers and like a bit of a perfectionist. And it just shows that a lot of your restrictions in life come from work-oriented obligations or relationships, like work commitments and stuff like that, because Libra is about agreements and the 6th house is about our productivity, our work, or our routine. So you might have like a very, very committed routine or something like that, where other people depend on you when you have this placement. Or you just have also a lot of like appeal towards quality of work or like standards that could be self-imposed. Next, we have Saturn and Libra in the 7th house. So if you have Saturn and Libra in this house, this shows responsibilities and interpersonal obligations that oppose with your own self-focus, because the 7th house is about others and it's about relationships, and it opposes the 1st house. The 1st house is about our own focus or our way of wanting to do things. So Saturn in the 7th house can be frustrating in the sense that you will have a lot of obligations that oppose from your own personal freedom in some way, in like a very direct fashion. And sometimes your own desires as well. And Saturn, since it shows fears or avoidance or things that are unpleasant, sometimes it can show certain avoidance of relationships for the fear of them opposing from your own freedom in some way. And that's because naturally the ascendant will be in Libra, not in Libra, in Aries or in Pisces if you have Saturn here in Libra in the 7th house. Could also be in another sign, but those will be the 90% majority. And those are more self-focused or solitary signs. So anyways, Saturn in the 7th house can restrict your experience with relationships from this desire to avoid responsibilities. Also, whenever those that have Saturn in the 7th house in Libra act selfishly, they manifest a lot of like consequences or like, restrictions and stuff. And that's because Saturn's about restrictions. And Saturn is putting a lot of emphasis on your 7th house, which is about your commitments and your agreements towards other people. And the 7th house can also be about law as well. So there can be legal obligations towards things. The next house placement that we're going to talk about is the 8th house. And having Saturn and Libra in the 8th house, which can be about debt, and it's about the resources of others, and it's about things that are out of our control. So that's why the 8th house shows power struggles. And Saturn and Libra in the 8th house can show indebtedness towards others in some way. And the other thing, though, is there can be this need to also set boundaries with others and achieve some sort of like state of balance or harmony when it comes to your relationships, because there can be a lot of negative or limiting circumstances that you attract from not having boundaries. And that's because the natural sign that has the 8th house in Libra is Pisces, and Pisces is quite boundless, sensitive, and vulnerable. And the 8th house can be about power struggles or control or manipulation. And, Saturn is about setting strong boundaries, especially when it's in Libra. It's very exalted there. And Anyway, there's two things that can happen with this placement, which is the debt aspect of this, where you might rely a lot on others, and that might create responsibilities or obligations and restrictions within your own personal freedom. Or other people might be taking advantage of you if you don't set good boundaries yourself too. And like those are the karma and the lessons that you experience throughout life. And like you manifest a lot of like slowdowns or blockages in life when you are not setting healthy boundaries, when you have displacement and like clear verbal agreements. Next, we have the ninth house. So if you have Saturn in Libra in the ninth house, which is the house of philosophy, beliefs, and convictions, Saturn is having to do with your sense of belief and like your philosophy in life. And those that have Saturn in the ninth house have more realistic beliefs. They are more so pessimists than optimists, because Saturn is a pessimistic planet and is the planet of fear, but also of being realistic and structured. And the people that have Saturn in Libra in this placement have a philosophy that revolves around credibility and social agreement, because Libra is the sign of society and it's the sign of agreement, and Saturn is about status or credibility. And together, Saturn is exalted in Libra because it's all about trust and credentials, and it's also about commitments and reliability. So those that have Saturn and Libra in the ninth house have a tendency to only believe in reliable information or reliable quote unquote sources. And since the ninth house shows inspiration, educational path, and stuff like that, this placement can show a hard educational path, like hard college and higher education. And also, it shows people that are inspired by important figures. Like they'll look up to very important figures in society that have achieved a position of like social like support or agreement or something like that. So like people that have Nobel Peace Prizes could be a good metaphor or example of that. Or like people that have like very high degrees or high credentials of mastery or something. So anyways, also your beliefs will tend to revolve around like credible sources or towards like societally agreed upon things. And then other than that, you might be more closed-minded or more pessimistic when it comes to your beliefs or your philosophy. And finally, since Saturn is exalted and it's in your ninth house, this shows that you have this ability to achieve an exalted Saturn, which means, very high credentials through your path of education. Because the ninth house is about higher education. So Saturn can be achieved through higher education in your chart. And Saturn is about respect, success, and credentials and credibility when it's in Libra specifically. Next, we have the 10th house, placement of Saturn in Libra. And this placement shows that the restrictions of Saturn comes from obligations towards their position or their reputation. And they are very careful to maintain the social support of the public. And there's not much room for them to fuck up. Because the 10th house Saturn placement shows a high potential for success. But it shows that one must be careful, and one like there's not much room for scandals or for like mistakes or social disgrace. Saturn in the 10th house, since Saturn brings consequences and challenges, when one does not make responsible decisions, it tends to affect their image in this case, because Saturn is happening in the house of image, and it impacts their trust. It impacts also like their reputation. So some of the most prominent figures in history have had Saturn in the 10th house, or conjunct the midheaven. So for example, Michael Jackson had Saturn conjunct his midheaven almost directly. So these are some of the most high successful people, but they also struggle with scandals throughout their life when they make irresponsible decisions, or if they're accused of such things. And sometimes it could, just be the challenge of Saturn being there that creates those scandals. And like it just, spurs gossip or something that you have to fight through being a dependable person. So another person that has Saturn in the 10th house is Will Smith. There's a lot of different very top of their field people that have Saturn in the 10th house. And that's because Saturn is the ruler of the 10th house, and it shows the highest pinnacles of success. But it shows that you have to be very careful about your brand and image, such as people like Will Smith tend to be, and of course Michael Jackson. They always had a lot of responsibilities or stress or worry around, maintaining a clear and universal image. And so you might also experience that in your lesser or equal form. Lesser if like you might not be in the public sector, this social sphere, the world kind of stage, but like you kind of have that similar need to maintain a reputation in your own smaller community or something. And ultimately a lot of restrictions or obligations can occur from your position or the image that you hold, and you might spend a lot of time working as well. And yeah, that's because Saturn shows challenges, restrictions, or limitations, and for you it's coming from the 10th house, which is about work. So the next aspect or the next house that we're going to talk about is the 11th house. So if you have Saturn in Libra in the 11th house, this shows obligations towards a certain social circle, a certain cause or activity that you partake in. And that's because the 11th house shows the groups that we are part of, and it's also about our individuality. And it's about friends as well. And all of those things dictate our individuality. So those that have Saturn in Libra, they have certain commitments towards groups or causes that they are partaking in, or like friendship circles, or like they may have colleagues or something that depend on them, extracurricular wise, so like in outside of work activities. Also Saturn in Libra shows people that want to gain support for their individuality, because when Saturn is in the 11th house, this is about establishing your individuality and personal freedom through garnering respect for yourself and through becoming self-reliant, because the 11th house was traditionally ruled by Saturn, and it's all about being an authority over yourself. In modern times, it's ruled by Uranus, which is the rebel and the self-directed authority, and so when you have Saturn in Libra, it can show that throughout life, the main restriction or challenges that you face is about garnering the respect of others towards your own individuality or your own self-reliance, and maybe gaining support for your individuality in some way through making it a successful thing, or like making it into a successful image for yourself, which takes hard work and attention to detail, because Saturn shows the type of success that doesn't come easily, and it's like coming from your own ambition and hard work. So you might have to work hard to garner certain respect towards a certain cause, or towards your own like established identity or individuality or something like that. So last but not least, this leads us to the 12th house, placement of Saturn in Libra. So if you have this placement, this shows that you are somebody that is careful of the implications of what you do or say, because the 12th house is about confusion, misunderstandings, chaos, and victimization at times too. And so when Saturn is in your 12th house, which is the house of the subconscious, you manifest a lot of karma or restrictions that come from being held to your word, or like being held to things that you were not conscious of. So, there could have been this struggle of being unconscious of, the things that you commit yourself to when you say certain things or do certain things. Or it's like always consequences feel like they come out of the blue for you when Saturn happens to be in your 12th house in your birth chart. And a lot of the responsibilities in your life, or the restrictions, or slow situations, have come from having to order the chaos in your life and not being able to overlook certain rules or structures. Because the 12th house can show being blind to certain things, or overlooking certain things, or being unconscious of them. So Saturn being there shows that there was important things in a past life that you just like didn't pay attention to, or you just overlooked them. Or even in this life, sometimes you unconsciously overlooked very important or consequential things when it came to your decision making, or to the way that you relate towards other people. So if always sometimes feels like you're a victim, or you're getting consequences that you don't deserve, until you introspect a little bit and see how you could have been more structured or preventative of the misunderstandings. And the 12th house can show institutions and imprisonment. So those that have Saturn in Libra, in some cases, can experience imprisonment or being in an institution of some sort, especially for in extreme cases. But Saturn in Libra is all about respecting laws and structure. So that only happens if you're blatantly disrespecting certain obligations, or like overlooking them. So let's see. And it's all about not wanting to be involved in something that you didn't want to be involved into as well. So that's the last thing about Saturn and Libra in the 12th house. So it's like being careful of the implications of what you say or do, or being careful about, overlooking certain important things, and like learning to become more organized or something. Because 12th house can be about disorder. So that is Saturn in Libra through each of the houses. I appreciate the support and you guys listening. If you enjoyed, don't forget to like this video, and you will also like my natal chart readings if you enjoyed this. And so if that is something that you would like to gain more info on, which is like your placements, your life purpose, and basically how you are seen by others, as well as like the talents that you possess, then check out my natal chart readings, which is linked in the description. And this is a 1 hour long, approximately, pre-recorded video covering each of your placements. And more specifically, it's covering like your personality based on the big 3 placements, your talents, which are based on the 2nd house, and next, like the finances of your astrology, as well as your career astrology. And then I finish by talking about your North Node, which is your life path. So if that interests you and you resonated with this placement a lot, then check out my website, astroseri.com, where I offer various types of readings. So with that being said, I will talk to you sometime soon, either in a reading, if you choose to book one, or in another video in the future. Peace.